A warm welcome to the Big Barton Film Show on Barton FM with me, Sudip Bhaduri, your movie host. You can hear this online and on digital, replayed during the week, and now you can hear this on YouTube, together with stills of movie films and movie actors and actresses related to the particular show. And every week I'm taking you back in time to a golden year with the cinema still in lockdown. This year is 2001. And the major news in 2001 was, of course, the tragedy that was 9/11, and the memories are still fresh for many, and the war that ensued in its aftermath with the eventual capture of Osama bin Laden. I recall 9/11 very well because I lost a dear friend in the second tower, and I still keep in touch with his family. Tony Blair won a second landslide victory, but was Tony's popularity waning? Only time would tell in the years to come. The year was a very bad one for the rail networks in the UK, with delays, safety checks, dozens of shaky companies, financial wheelings and dealings, and the passengers bore the brunt of it. And sadly, this story still exists. We mourn the death of the great Beatle George Harrison. I loved My Sweet Lord, Bangladesh and What Is Life. And don't forget, he funded and produced one of the greatest comedies ever made in Monty Python's Life of Brian. So what about the movies at the cinemas this year? There were some tedious ones. I can recall Moulin Rouge. I know some people worship this movie, but all it is, actors trying to sing with a hodgepodge of pop songs in the background. And that was entertainment, apparently. There was the pointless yawn fest, which was Vanilla Sky, starring Tom Cruise in one of his worst roles. Pearl Harbor, with a very poorly acted romantic triangle amidst the carnage of the battle scenes, which were quite sensational. Typical Michael Bay. No substance, lots of noise. There were some weak sequels like Hannibal, Jurassic Park 3 and Rush Hour 2. But there were some worthy mentions. It's not all doom and gloom in 2001. Pixar struck gold with the very funny Monsters, Inc., with John Goodman and Billy Crystal providing superb, very funny voiceovers. Denzel Washington was a crooked cop in Training Day, which bagged him an Oscar the following year. We had the start of the Fast and Furious franchise, which is still making bucks 19 years later, sadly minus Paul Walker. And also the true events surrounding the Somalian War and the American involvement in Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down. So what about my top three films of 2001? Number 3, from DreamWorks comes Shrek. Hard to believe it's 19 years ago. With the voices of Eddie Murphy, Mike Myers and Cameron Diaz, a monstrously entertaining fairy tale romp, taking the mickey out of fairy tales, big style, with great state-of-the-art CGI, and this won the very first Oscar for Best Animated Feature in 2002. So we have a disliked ogre living in muddy swamps whose habitat becomes the refugee camp for some famous fairy tale characters thanks to the evil Lord Farquaad. And that's where the fun starts. Very clever script, directed by Andrew Adamson. This is fast, irreverent and superbly animated, and sadly the sequels that followed were tame and weak. Number 2, Mulholland Drive, another untalked about gem made by the superb David Lynch, with Naomi Watts and Justin Theroux. We have a young movie starlet called Betty, played by Watts, who turns up to her aunt's luxury apartment in Hollywood to discover a woman is already there, and she has no memory of why she is there. Thus starts the mystery, and Betty will become the sleuth. There becomes also a chain of strange events. This is classic David Lynch. He makes us want to think. He makes us want to interpret what's going on. A film noir, as the experts would say. This is trademark Lynch. He likes visual fetish movies, big style, and this is one of his hypnotic best. But my number one film of 2001 is Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings. I'm a great Tolkien fan. I couldn't wait until the trilogy started in the cinemas. This is made by Peter Jackson, filmed in New Zealand, and it's the commencement of Frodo Baggins' journey to the dark land of Mordor to destroy the One Ring to rule them all, which was in the possession of the evil Sauron. He has to go with the help of his fellow hobbits, together with a ranger called Aragorn, the wizard Gandalf, a tough dwarf called Gimli, an elf prince called Legolas, who can't stand dwarves, and the warrior Boromir. So it stars Elijah Wood, Viggo Mortensen, Sir Ian McKellen and Sean Bean. No doubt the filming in New Zealand boosted vacation figures there. This was a task and a half for Jackson to achieve the impossible. 2 further films followed in the years to come, in The Two Towers and The Return of the King, the latter winning Best Film Oscar in 2003. The Fellowship won a whole host of Oscars for technical achievements. It's top of the line hokum, packing many punches. There are a few major omissions, as Tolkien devotees will grumble, from the book, but that aside, it's solid entertainment to the 9th degree. My film of the year, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings. Lord of the Rings moves in fits and starts, but is beautifully executed by Jackson, with a great supporting cast featuring Sean Astin and Sir Christopher Lee. Orlando Bloom was very athletic, but he hasn't really had a really great film career since then, has he? And the wonderful score by Howard Shore, still hummed and revered to this day and forever as one of the greatest film soundtracks of all time. Also released this year, the very strange Donnie Darko with a young Jake Gyllenhaal and a very strange large rabbit. Haley Joel Osment was in A1, Artificial Intelligence, made by Steven Spielberg. Not many people talk about this because it wasn't that great, and he was a robot child. Russell Crowe, fresh from his success in Gladiator, was also a brilliant mathematician called John Nash in A Beautiful Mind, made by Ron Howard. Harry Potter began his cinematic journey in The Philosopher's Stone. It was called The Sorcerer's Stone across the pond, and made stars of the very young cast. And let's not forget Julian Fellowes, writer and director, who brought us the superb Dame Maggie Smith and the rest in Gosford Park. And Heath Ledger, the late great Heath Ledger, was a real hero in the very average A Knight's Tale. So what about the movie news from 2001? Well, at the Oscars, Russell Crowe won Best Actor for Gladiator, which also won Best Film for Sir Ridley Scott. Best Director was Steven Soderbergh for Traffic. He also made a film that year called Erin Brockovich, which nabbed a gong for Julia Roberts as Best Actress. Best Supporting Actor was Benicio del Toro for Traffic. And Best Supporting Actress, Marcia Gay Harden in the film about Jackson Pollock, which also starred Ed Harris. Some famous people passed away this year. Stanley Kramer, good director. He made films like The Defiant Ones and The Judgment at Nuremberg. And that ever great actor Anthony Quinn. Remember him in Zorba the Greek, Lust for Life? He sadly left us. The irrepressible Jack Lemmon, who can forget Some Like It Hot, Mr. Roberts, The China Syndrome, The Apartment, the list is endless. One of the great comedy drama actors that Hollywood has ever had. Jamie Bell, aged 14, won a BAFTA for Best Actor in Billy Elliot, beating Russell Crowe. So tit for tat across the pond. Opening weekend in America, Harry Potter's film The Sorcerer's Stone made a record $95 million in 2001. A young up-and-coming Irish actor called Colin Farrell made a storming breakthrough performance in the boot camp drama Tigerland. Tim Burton directed the newer version of Planet of the Apes with Mark Wahlberg, which quite frankly was a letdown for Burton. This was not good on his CV. He's done a lot of great things, but this is not one of his best. Bridget Jones' Diary was wooing the fans in April. She was everyone's favourite single woman, not my cup of tea, with a very pathetic long fight between Hugh Grant and Colin Firth, and a so-so soundtrack. And around winter time, there was a scrap between Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings for box office supremacy. And that's just about it from me for another week. Thank you for joining me this week for 2001. Next week, I'll take you to 2014 or 2014. Stay safe and take care.